On July 20th, 1944, a staff officer walked into a military conference carrying a briefcase. The meeting was at the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's field headquarters in East Prussia. The officer was Klaus Schenk Graf von Stauffenberg, a wounded veteran who had lost an eye, a hand, and fingers in North Africa, yet still served close enough to the center of power to enter Hitler's world of maps, couriers, guards, and routine. Inside the briefcase was a bomb. The plan was not only to kill Adolf Hitler. It was to use the shock of his death to seize command inside Germany, turn the reserve army against the Nazi leadership, and create a government that might end the war. The plot was born from catastrophe and conscience. By the summer of 1944, Germany was losing the war it had begun. Allied troops had landed in Normandy. The Red Army was pushing west after enormous battles on the Eastern Front. German cities had been bombed, soldiers were dying in vast numbers, and the regime's crimes were no longer rumors to many people inside the state. Some conspirators had opposed Hitler earlier. Others came late after military disaster and moral horror had become impossible to separate. They were not a single democratic movement. They included army officers, conservative civilians, aristocrats, church-linked critics, administrators, and diplomats with different ideas about Germany's future. What joined them was the conviction that Hitler's rule had to end. Stauffenberg became central because he combined motive, access, and nerve. He had seen the war from inside the army and understood that obedience could become complicity. He also served in a staff role connected to the replacement army, the forces inside Germany that could be mobilized under an emergency plan called Operation Valkyrie. Valkyrie was designed to restore order if unrest or rebellion threatened the state. The conspirators wanted to turn that plan inside out. Once Hitler was dead, they would issue orders in the language of legitimate authority, arrest Nazi leaders, occupy communication centers, and tell commanders that they were saving Germany from an SS coup. The bomb was only the opening move. The real contest would be over orders, telephones, radio, and belief. The physical setting mattered. Surviving accounts and physical evidence from the room also matter because they show cause, record, and consequence at the scale of a table, a door, a telephone, and a courtyard. The Wolf's Lair was remote, guarded, and full of military routine. Hitler held conferences there with officers who moved through checkpoints and carried papers into briefing rooms. On July 20th, the meeting was shifted to a wooden hut instead of a more enclosed bunker, partly because of summer heat. That detail helped save Hitler. A blast in a sealed concrete room might have been more lethal. In the wooden conference room, the force could escape through windows and walls. Another detail mattered even more. After Stauffenberg placed the briefcase near Hitler and left, someone moved it behind a heavy table support. The leg of a table became one of the hinges of 20th century history. Stauffenberg and his aide, Werner von Heefen, had armed only one explosive charge under difficult, hurried conditions. Stauffenberg's injuries made the preparation slow, and interruption forced them to move before all the explosives were ready. He entered the conference, placed the briefcase, made an excuse to leave, and got away. Then the bomb exploded. The hut was shattered. Men were killed and wounded. Smoke and debris filled the scene. From Stauffenberg's point of view, the destruction looked sufficient. He began the journey back to Berlin, believing Hitler was dead. But Hitler survived. He was injured, shaken, and his clothing was torn, yet he was alive. That fact turned the conspiracy into a race. In Berlin, the plotters at the Bendlerblock needed to launch Valkyrie quickly, but they also needed certainty. If they moved and Hitler lived, they would be traitors with no protection. If they waited, loyalists would control the story. Their hesitation cost them. Orders did go out, some units acted, some officers were arrested. But other commanders waited, doubted, or tried to learn which side was safer. In a dictatorship, the first question after a coup attempt is not always who is right, it is who will still have power at midnight. Communications decided the struggle. Nazi loyalists used telephone and radio to prove Hitler was alive. Joseph Goebbels spoke directly with wavering officers. Messages from the Wolf's Lair contradicted the coup orders coming from Berlin. The reserve army plan, which depended on disciplined obedience, began to break apart because commanders no longer believed the authority behind it. The conspirators had tried to use the machinery of command against the regime, but the regime still controlled enough of that machinery to answer back. By late evening, the Bendlerblock had become a trap. Officers who had hesitated or shifted loyalty arrested the plotters. Stauffenberg, Heefen, Friedrich Albrecht, and Albrecht Merz von Kornheim were shot in the courtyard before dawn. Ludwig Beck was dead inside the building. The immediate coup had failed. The retaliation continued for months. The People's Court, with Roland Freisler presiding, turned trials into public humiliation. Many conspirators were executed. Families were punished. Associates were watched, imprisoned, or ruined. The regime used the failed attempt to demonstrate that even high rank and old names could not protect dissent. The July 20th plot has always been difficult to remember simply. It was courageous but late. It resisted Hitler, but many conspirators had served the state they later tried to overthrow. It aimed to end a criminal regime, but the opposition's political visions were mixed and sometimes limited. It did not create a mass uprising. Most Germans learned of the event through Nazi control of news, rumor, and punishment, yet the failure does not make the act meaningless. It shows how hard resistance becomes once institutions have been bent toward obedience, fear, and war. It shows that command structures can offer opportunities, but also that bureaucracy, hesitation, and communication can defeat courage. Today, memorials at the Bendlerblock and at the Wolf's Lair site ask viewers to think about responsibility rather than only drama. The briefcase, the table, the telephones, the courtyard, and the courtroom are not just props in a thriller. They are evidence of a larger question. When a government has become criminal, what does duty require? How late is too late to act? And what does it cost when people wait until catastrophe has narrowed every choice? July 20th, 1944 did not save Germany from Hitler, but it left a record that even inside a murderous state, some people finally chose to disobey.